Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to the Niche Cast. We are from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. I've kind of switched up the domestic cricket coverage this summer to make things easier and more streamlined. So I'm just delivering the basics, the basic information, the best performers for each team, and that enables me to get them done. Plunket Shield, Halliburton Johnston Shield, and a newsletter on a Monday. So I've been able to tinker with that to get something out published on the website, which is to say that the Plunket Shield stats and info is all there on the website. HBJ Shield stats and info is all there on the website. I imagine we'll have a National League finals debrief coming at you in the next few days as well. Flying Kiwis will be published. And there is a couple of rugby league yarns as well. Broke down the Warriors' widest squad and also did the first of the Kiwi NRL summer guides covering the Queensland clubs, that is the Cowboys, Dolphins, Broncos and Titans. Next up, we've got Newcastle Knights, Manly Seagulls, Rabbitohs and Roosters. And I'm kind of doing it for teams at the moment. So those, the Queensland one and the Warriors breakdown is on the website at the moment, and that sets up the rugby league chat later in the podcast. Hopefully we've got a nice little window. Had to rush it in a few times recently, but that's all right. We'll, where I'll be talking Warriors squad stuff and the Roosters in Rolleston, the Rolleston Roosters. So the Roosters are going to appear in the next Kiwi NRL summer guide, which will be published over the next few days. And of course, I've gone deep into the Warriors stuff on our website as well. All of that can be found on our website, theniche-case.com. Monday was newsletter day yesterday. So shout out to everyone who has signed up for our newsletter. Via Substack, you got a whole lot of Blackcaps stats. You got some also the Roosters in Rolleston, also the White Ferns. The White Ferns coming up against Australia. We won't be talking White Ferns in the podcast, so I'll just drop these White Ferns stats here that came from our newsletter yesterday. The White Ferns are 31-100 in ODIs against Australia. The White Ferns are 3-31 in ODIs against Australia since the start of 2010. The White Ferns have lost 13 consecutive ODIs against Australia. Their last win was the opposite of a White Fern sweep, because they won the first game, then lost the next two games, which started their losing streak, and that was in 2017. Susie Bates is the only current White Fern who averages over 25 in ODIs against Australia. Lee Kasparek is the only bowler who averages below 25 in ODIs against Australia, but she's kind of been shunned from the ODI team, so she's not going to play, which leaves Amelia Kerr as the only White Fern, the only current ODI White Fern averaging below 30 against Australia with the ball. So the White Ferns have lost 13 consecutive ODIs against Australia. There is one batter averaging over 30 against Australia in ODIs, and there is one current ODI White Fern, unless Lee Kasparek gets a little cricketing miracle, averaging below 30 with the ball for the White Ferns against Australia. So very excited for the sold-out, buzz-generating ODI series between the White Ferns and Australia, which is part of the Women's Championship. I don't actually think it will have any bearing on the Women's Championship, though, but it is to say it's coming. And we'll see what happens. But you would have already read that in our newsletter yesterday if you're signed up, thenichecase.substack.com, as well as lots of football, bit of breakers, and a Stephen Adams check-in. We won't talk Stephen Adams in our podcast today, but you can read about Stephen Adams, what he's up to with the Houston Rockets in the NBA in our newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. And if you'll sign up to that newsletter, you can upgrade to a paid subscription and then access our weekly bonus podcast. But of course, the best way to support the Niche Case straight up the guts is through Patreon, patreon.com/ELNicheCase, ELNicheCase. Big up to everyone in the Patreon whānau. We appreciate you. We're not online a whole lot, so we appreciate your support regardless of how online we are. And of course, we do drop that bonus podcast every Thursday, which this week, I imagine, is going to feature a lot of Blackcaps versus England. It's going to preview the A-League derby between Auckland FC and Wellington Phoenix. Probably have some Plunket Shield cricket to chat, maybe some HBJ Shield cricket to chat. National League's kind of quieting down, so we might dip into the Flying Kiwis basket as well. But I can guarantee we'll be talking a lot of Blackcaps cricket and a lot of A-League derby in our bonus podcast on Thursday, which is only available on Patreon and for those with a paid Substack subscription. We appreciate your support. We're here every week chatting Kiwi sport. That's all we do. That's all we want to do. We're not out here trying to be this or be that. We're just here to chat some Kiwi sport. But we're like your friendly something. I don't know. We're just the lads in the garage, lads in the shed, spinning a yarn about Kiwi sport. Hope you're doing all right around Aotearoa. Big up to you. Extra big bonus mana waves to everyone supporting us on Patreon and with a paid Substack subscription and on Buy Me a Coffee. We're doing it for you. And we start our podcast with a dose of mindfulness. What do you got, Chief?
I have got from the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge of his poem called The Nightingale. Quote, "In nature, there is nothing melancholy." End quote.
It's kind of crazy because sometimes the melancholy comes from nature. Like if you're in a certain kind of nature vibe, maybe autumn time or just a rainy day, that can set the tone of melancholy.
That's kind of exactly what he says in the poem as well as he carries on. He's like, but in nature there is nothing melancholy but some night wandering man whose heart was pierced with remembrance of a grievous wrong, blah, 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 blah. It's like effectively saying we see the melancholy reflected in nature, but we bring it to nature in order for it to be there.
I concur. Like rainy days can be beautiful, but falling leaves in autumn can be beautiful, but we forecast our melancholy onto nature, whereas I agree. There's nothing melancholy about nature. It's beautiful, it's uplifting, and we should all tap in, because that's what we do. Not to big up ourselves, but we're all about the nature. We don't really care about this internet shit. We care about talking about Aotearoa sport and nature. So we don't find any melancholy, aside from what I just said. We don't find any melancholy in nature. We actually heal ourselves in nature. We check in with nature. We go deep into nature, and then we come back and check into the internet with some Aotearoa sport. That's who we are, and that's what we do. Little PSA about the niche case.
Yeah, we'll take that. We big up ourselves a little bit on that, maybe, but you got to do a little bit. Sometimes, at least it's maybe that's a reflection as well. I'm not sure. I mean, if you want to take it even deeper, you could argue that the nature doesn't actually have the positivity aspect either. That's a reflection as well. That's a projection, and actually, nature is just kind of like the eternal neutral kind of force, but. We don't need to go too deep and spoil it. Projecting the melancholy is kind of a sad thing. Well, sometimes it's good though. Sometimes it's a little bit healthy to have the balance, of course, but sticking with we don't need to pop the bubble of projecting the positive forces onto nature as well, because that is actually useful. That is actually helpful. Projection or not.
Yeah, I think that's where we cross the line into getting too deep into our regular programming. Regular styles.
Yeah,
but
which can definitely happen. So yes,
we'll draw it back. We'll ground ourselves, and we will start our Aotearoa sporting chat. I got a couple of questions just to get the flow, the juices flowing, moving and a grooving. Joseph Parker has a fight lined up against Daniel Dubois early next year, February 22nd. Joseph Parker's gaining a bit of momentum in recent years, I'd say. Last couple of years, he's been in a nice groove. Resurgent Joseph Parker, actual resurgence, not a Blackcaps White Ferns resurgence, but an actual resurgence from Joseph Parker. Are you excited about his next fight lined up with Daniel Dubois?
Am I excited? Yeah, it's if it all goes ahead, this will be a title fight. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. It's a stage he hasn't been on since he got beaten by Anthony Joshua, and his career has had several ups and downs and whatnot ever since then. It's been a strange journey. It's been an interesting journey for Joseph Parker. He even his resurgence feels like it's had a couple of resurgence, like a couple of ups and downs in there because there was the Derek Chisora wins and uh, that felt like he was moving into something else, and then he got knocked out by Joe Joyce, and suddenly he was back where he was a couple years earlier, and then just more recently, I think the triumphant aspect of not so much how he fought. I think how he fought was how he's always fought. It's just he was better at it. But being able to beat Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang in a row, two big name fights, and just getting those dubs the way that he did, that has absolutely put him back on the heavyweight map. And it was, well, I thought it was a little bit of a stitch up when they didn't manage to find room to include him on the Fury versus Usyk undercard, which is what he was sort of banking on, was that he'd be part of that fight and that would be his next / last fight of 2024. Didn't get that, which means he hasn't actually fought since the Zhang fight, which was in like May or March or something like that. It was quite a while ago, so he's gone a fair spell without a bout, but his patience seems like it has been rewarded because Daniel Dubois recently just, a bit of an upset. He's been one of those guys who's been lurking in that position that Parker was trying to get out of recently as well, where like you're sort of a contender, but you're maybe not enough of a contender to actually get like a title challenging fight. But then there was the one bout that Usyk had to renege, which meant it was open for Anthony Joshua to go after, and Joshua fought Dubois, but Dubois beat Joshua. And all expectation was that Joshua would do what he did when he was upset by Andy Ruiz a couple years ago, a guy that Joseph Parker's beaten just quietly, and call for the rematch and probably win the rematch. But it seems Joshua is not taking the rematch on that, which has opened it up to challenges. And because Fury versus Usyk is happening again and cleaning up the rest of the bouts, well, that means it's Dubois like, who do you want? Who's out there? Joseph Parker's out there. And it's a bit like, how the UFC is able to, because it's sort of got like a singular governing body. Well, it is a singular governing body. It's the UFC is what it is. It's this, and this works in very good and also very frustrating ways where they sort of get to pick their fights rather than leaving it up to like cross bout politics and what you get in boxing a lot. Because Saudi Arabia have got like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have pretty much taken over heavyweight boxing. They kind of run it the way the UFC runs their stuff now. So they effectively, like when Zhang might have wanted to take his rematch clause against Parker, I think he was kind of nudged towards, no, let's see you fight Deontay Wilder instead, because we don't actually want you to fight Parker again. That's not such an interesting fight. But the two guys who Parker's beaten, which did happen, by the way, Zhang beat Deontay Wilder earlier this year. Like, that's a more interesting fight. Let's make that happen. And when you have unlimited funds, you can always get the fighters to do what you want because you just pay them more for the one that you want them to take, So yeah, this has all just kind of worked out nicely for Joseph Parker, where it was a difficult place that he was in. Like, he got himself above that level of that crowded level of heavyweight contenders into heavyweight genuine, like, or maybe out of heavyweight prospects into heavyweight contenders. I'm not sure how you want to define the thing, but he broke free from the chasing pack there, but at a time when it's very hard to actually get a look at the bouts because they're all wrapped up in unification bouts for the last couple of years. That's been the case, except for this one bout that's come free at the right time, and now he's potentially, as it all goes to plan, going to get to fight Daniel Dubois to see if he can win it. So I think it's the IBF that he'll be going for. He was formerly the WBO champion, and I think Parker is actually ranked on the WBO, but it sounds like if he takes the IBF title fight, this is boxing politics for you, he'll have to withdraw his ranking status from the WBO, where I think he's actually like the the designated challenger for that. But I mean, designated challenger means you're in line for a title fight. But if he's being offered a title fight for a different belt, well, that's the thing that your designated challenger status is trying to get you to. So you don't need to wait for that one to pay off. You just take the one that's on offer. So yeah, good, really exciting, promising stuff for Joseph Parker. It is maybe a little bit of a thing that because he's someone who always says he feels like he fights better when he fights more often. So the fact that he'll have gone close to, well, probably 10, 11 months or something like that in between fights is maybe not the ideal situation for him. But at the same time, you want a title fight, you take it how it comes, especially in the current era of boxing where, like I say, unification bouts is just clogging everything up. You don't get the perfect alignment for a title fight. You just take the one that's on offer and do your best with it. So yeah, that'll be a fun fight. I wish I had more to say about Daniel Dubois, but I just haven't seen him fight often enough to really get an idea of how he matches up with Joseph Parker. But that's for the coming months to figure out, I suppose.
Joseph Parker does make a lot more money than most UFC fighters, and I'd say
Yes.
I reckon Joseph Parker's made a lot more money. Not a lot more money. I reckon he's made more money than Israel Adesanya in the UFC, and that's just a boxing versus UFC.
I reckon that's a safe bet.
Comparison. Next question. Chris Wood. He scored a penalty for Nottingham Forest against Ipswich. And it's the 27th different club that Chris Wood has scored a Premier League goal against. He has now scored 7 penalty kicks out of 7 penalty kicks in a row. We've talked a lot about Chris Wood in the Premier League. We've talked a lot about Chris Wood, like what we love about him as a striker. Just his goal-scoring instincts, positioning, and his defensive work. I actually think, like Chris Wood, and this is something to watch out for when we get into the A-League Derby, defense starts with the striker. And how the strikers not only press, but how they cover the passing lanes, the angles into the midfield. And Chris Wood's excellent at that. Like, he's always looking over his shoulder. He's always covering the pass into the center midfielders, which means he's basically marking 2 people at the same time because he's covering the ball, but then he's also covering the bloke in behind him. Shout out Chris Wood. But Chris Wood's also really good at penalty kicks. Maybe he's one of the best penalty takers in the Premier League. And you always know that someone's good at penalty kicks when his teammates are already celebrating before he actually kicks it, and that happened most recently in the Ipswich Town game. It's happened a few times with his penalties. My question is, what makes Chris Wood so good at penalty kicks?
Well, let me just whip up his statisticos here, because 7 in a row in the Premier League, that's great. He's never missed a penalty in the Premier League. He's gone 7 for 7. He's he scored those penalties for 3 of them for Burnley, 2 for Newcastle, 2 for Nottingham Forest. So he spread them out across his different clubs as well. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Chris Wood has never missed a penalty for the All Whites either. Chris Wood he took 1 penalty for New Zealand under-23s. He didn't miss that. He scored it. Chris Wood scored plenty of penalties for Leeds United. Chris Wood has also popped up scoring goals and penalty shootouts around the place as well in various situations, from the Olympics to the League Cup. Actually, they've all been in the League Cup except for one in the Olympic Games 2021 against Japan. Yeah, that's right. We lost that one. Add those all together. Open play it's not open play, but regular goal penalty type things during the game, penalty shootouts as well. He has not missed a penalty under any circumstances in serious senior football or including under 23 stuff, which he wasn't under 23 at the time, but he was one of the overage players for that Olympics team. Has not missed a penalty since Leeds United versus Hull City, 23rd of April 2016. Skied one over the top that day against goalkeeper Alan McGregor. So that is 29 consecutive penalties that he's scored across 8.5 years. there's no way I could figure out what that looks like compared to, other strikers in the world. But I would imagine there's not very many high caliber players, like international level players, who have a record like a current penalty streak that can match that. It is incredible stuff from Chris Wood, and it goes on and on. And it's to the point where now, like, I'm so invested in tracking the stat that when he steps up to take a penalty, knowing that he's one of the best penalty takers in the world, I'm just worried that he's going to miss because I'm like, oh, it'll spoil the stat. Maybe I've jinxed it at this point, but it hasn't happened yet. I've been tracking this for several years, and he continues to just every time he takes one, bang, goal. And this latest one against Ipswich smacked it down the middle. They actually played the little right as he was lining up, they had a little like graphic in the corner of the broadcast which showed his 5 most recent penalties. And there were like 3 sort of semi down the middle, one to the left, one to the right. And I think when you're asking what makes Chris Wood such a good penalty taker, I would imagine that is a pretty significant factor of that is like you don't actually know which way he's going to go because he can bang it in the bottom corner, he can bang it in the top corner, he can go down the middle. Like he's scored in the various ones. So if you're tracking down his past, the film, trying to look at your goalkeeper coming up against Nottingham Forest, if you concede a penalty, it's likely to be Chris Wood. Every Premier League club has analysts for days, so they're tracking these things. They're looking for every little possible advantage they can find. If you're looking at that and saying like, well, Chris Wood 80% of the time shoots to his left, you're going to dive to your left, aren't you? Because you're thinking, law of averages, this is the most likely place I can go to save this penalty. You can't do that against a guy who's like mixes it up every time. Where he's scored either of the 3 directions he can go because he scores a few banging them down the middle as well. Another thing I noticed from his penalty against Ipswich specifically is that you see him lining up, you see him standing there waiting. He's marked his run up, he's ready to go. The whistle blows, and he waits. Like he takes an extra breath or two, and then he starts his little shuffle and then forward and then just like running straight onto it and slamming it. He's not one of those guys who does a little hop, skip, and jump or anything like that. He just smack that thing and put it where it needs to go. I think also maybe that is a factor too, is that he does hit the ball hard. So unless you're guessing, you have no time to react. And there's a risk involved there because the harder you hit it, the less control you have over it, like the less precise you might be. But he's just really good at hitting his spots, so that's fine. Like he's fine with that risk because he can overcome that risk with his ability to put the ball where he's aiming it. But also, yeah, that ability to just, or that consciousness to just wait, to say, I'm in control of this moment. This is my moment. I'm going to score this goal. Take an extra breath or two. There are a lot of studies on penalties because it's kind of an isolated part of a game. You can look into these various different aspects. There's a lot of sort of controllable factors. And there's definitely research to say that if you like players who rush their penalty, the whistle goes and you run up and take it straight away, are more likely to miss than players who take an extra couple seconds. But I think there is also a tipping point there. I found a few different sources. I was going to chuck something in the newsletter, but I didn't find something that I felt like covered all the bases. So short of like doing my own, working on my own thesis and drawing in a whole bunch of different elements, different research, I didn't have time to do that, so I didn't. But there does also seem to be a tipping point where you can wait too long or get too frisky with it and psych yourself out. But there's that sweet spot, which is like sort of 2 to 4 seconds or something like that after the whistle where, just an extra breath, stay in your rhythm, stay in your routine, but you don't rush it, gives you the best chance. And the fact that Chris Wood does these things that seem to align with the analytics of penalty taken as well suggests to me that despite the fact he doesn't really give the impression of someone who's very studious about this kind of stuff, definitely gives the impression of someone who works extremely hard on the training paddock and practices these things physically over and over and over. No doubt about that. I think maybe he's working very hard on some of these. I suspect he's at least very aware of these kind of like the penalty analytics side of things as well. That seems likely, seeing as how he happens to align with a lot of these ideas. But so to sum it all up, basically, I just think he's good at penalties because he ticks the boxes, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe he's just good at penalties full stop, and that's the answer.
The penalty that he missed did sound a lot like the penalty that he scored this week, though, where like you're describing a penalty kick where he goes over the top of the goal, and this one against Ipswich, he banged it into the roof of the net. And if there is a way of missing a penalty that just doesn't look good, it's banging it over the bar. You know, that seems like the worst way to miss a penalty. But as you're saying, he sounds like he puts a lot of effort into being good at penalties, with all the analytics, knowing what he's good at, his skill set, the best way to score a penalty, and that has him right now as one of the best penalty takers in the Premier League and the whole wide world. Another question for you. Did the Breakers get worse with the Freddie Gillespie Tacko Fall swap? The thinker in me believes that the Breakers shuffled Freddie Gillespie out to sign Tacko Fall. But the thinker in me also thinks, why would you do that? Because Freddie Gillespie was really good. So I don't know if I want to say that the Breakers did that. That's just an idea stewing in my mind. So let's just say a swap. They swapped Freddie Gillespie for Tacko Fall. Do you think the Breakers got worse with that swap?
Well, I'm happy to say that they shuffled Freddie Gillespie out to bring in Tacko Fall. I'm pretty confident in believing that's what happened. I mean, they presented it like Freddie Gillespie came to them with this offer that just he, couldn't be refused, and made it sound like they reluctantly accepted. And yeah, okay, and then I guess we'll just sign Tacko Fall then. It's like, well, you had Tacko Fall in the country training with your team for weeks without a contract and without an open import spot. So, that's just too convenient for my liking to believe any other kind of narrative on that. Then the Breakers wanted Tacko Fall to be a breaker. They've worked very hard to get Tacko Fall to be a breaker. Even when he kept getting injured, they continued to just, go down this pathway with him where it's like, why are you trying so hard? It's like, there's no way this is not what what the owner ultimately wanted to see, and this is what's happened. So that's that's how it's gone. But did they get worse by making this move? I think they got significantly worse. And the first two games that they've played, where they've conceded 232 points in 8 quarters, in particular, the first quarter of the loss against Illawarra, they gave up 32 points, which is heaps and kind of like way more than you should ever be giving up in the first quarter. Absolutely. However, the second game that they played since Tacko Fall's sign, they played the Wildcats on Sunday. Both these games were over the past week. They played Perth Wildcats and gave up 42 points in the first quarter. This is on the way to Bryce Cotton scoring 59 points in a game, which is the most anyone has scored for about 30 years or something like that in the Aussie NBL, which is incredible. Like, you have to be amazing in order to score that many points in a 40-minute game as well. This isn't a 48-minute NBA game. These are 10-minute quarters that they have in the Australian League. Makes it even crazier. Insane stuff, but also like you have to be an incredible individual player to do that. You also kind of need to be playing against a pretty bad defense so they don't come up with any way of stopping you at any point throughout the game. And this wasn't Tacko Fall's fault. I wrote in the newsletter after they played on Thursday and then they played on Sunday. So I wrote about both of those games in the newsletter. And the first game, you could see like the good and the bad of Tacko Fall. He's super tall. He blocks shots. You just can't lob anything over the top of him. If he's got position around the rim, good luck. However, if he's not in the rim, he's a complete liability because he can't move very well sideways or whatever. Like, he doesn't have the lateral foot movement or whatever the scouts might refer to it as. Leg speed. Yep. He doesn't have the leg speed. But because of that, like, he knows this. Tacko Fall is Tacko Fall. He knows how Tacko Fall plays basketball, right? He's played basketball as Tacko Fall his whole life because he is Tacko Fall. Identities are weird, but still, like, he is aware of his own weaknesses and he likes to play close to the rim. So he will just play close to the rim. And there were multiple examples you could see in his debut where he was just like hovering around the painted or just outside the painted area, because there are rules about getting too close to the sort of the zone specifically underneath the rim. And because of that, there would be like screens on the top of the key where he's just not there. So it's just a clear screen. Like there's no one to stop the opposition big from getting into position and getting the other guard to just run around into space. The space created by the screen. There's no one to switch off of when that happens or anything like that, because Tacko Fall is just not even trying to do that. And that's probably the best way for Tacko Fall to react in that situation. As I say, he knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses. The difference is that the Breakers don't know his strengths and weaknesses because they haven't played with him very much. Like they're still figuring this stuff out. Even when he's been with the team, he's been injured most of the times. It's not like he's been doing scrimmage work. Plus, they're in season, so you don't actually have that many specific training sessions to work on things like that. Your week is mostly spent traveling, recovering, and preparing for the next game, because it's a quick turnaround with all these things, especially when you have double game weeks like this one. So the Breakers have to adjust to having Tacko Fall out there. They have to. If he's out there offensively, he doesn't, because I'm just talking about his defensive work there, his attacking work, his scoring stuff. Like he dunks. He dunks without even having to jump. He's so tall. Yeah, it's kind of an incredible skill set. You can lob the ball to him around the rim, and he will probably throw it down. He won't do anything else, though. And he's a terrible free throw shooter, so if they can wrap him up, if that pass isn't perfect and they're able to get to him before he can just go straight up, or straight sideways, because he doesn't have to go up, then send him for the free throw line. I don't know what they would call it, but the Hacker Shack strategy for Tacko Fall would also be very useful in the ways. It's slightly different rulings to how they do it in the NBA versus how they do it in the NBL. So it's a little bit of a different thing, but that's still like you're not going to be afraid to foul the guy. In fact, you probably want to foul the guy because he's likely to miss the free throws because he doesn't have range. He doesn't have a jump shot. Like this is limited stuff, but as I say, there's fantastic. Like he got 5 blocks on Zebu in that first game. He had 5 blocks in like 15 minutes of action. So there's stuff that he does on a basketball court that is incredible because of the height that he's got, the length that he's got. But you have to play very specifically to how he plays in order to not expose the stuff that is severe weaknesses in his game. So the Breakers have to adapt their strategy on both ends. And if you're Parker Jackson Cartwright, like speedy, high scoring creator from out wide, not really a great 3-point shooter. He'll shoot his threes, but he's not a great one. He's sort of low 30 percentages, but he loves to get around the screen and attack the rim. He loves to get inside and just throw the ball out and facilitate from those kind of things, but facilitate in motion. He likes to be moving, he likes to be dribbling and letting things happen. Tacko Fall's not helping that, and Tacko Fall's probably just clogging his lane to the basket. So there's all these, like, you've made it tougher for your best player. You're asking the team to adapt on the fly, and it's totally weird because like they were 7-3. They were playing really well. They were looking good. They look like they found solutions, and now you're asking them to like I think the metaphor I used on Friday was like they're trying to change a tire on the car while the car is still moving. All right, you're in season. You've got this identity that you're starting to create, and in the middle of everything, you're being like, 10 games into the season, now let's actually change it up so we can get this other fella in there. And the irony of it is that the tire wasn't even burst. It wasn't deflated. It didn't have a hole in it. The tire was running fine. The car was running fine. They've just decided to do this. Well, I guess ownership has decided to do this, and the team has to just adapt and figure it out. And, well, yeah, whatever happened against Perth was a bit of a travesty defensively, but it wasn't Tacko Fall's fault. He played 6 minutes, so you can't blame Tacko Fall on that. You can't say that was because of him. But what you can say is it probably had a lot to do, well, regardless of, it's not play blame games, but let's just say, like, if Freddie Gillespie was there, I don't think Bryce Cotton scores 59 points. I don't think the Perth Wildcats score 123 points. Freddie Gillespie was borderline the team's best defender. He was playing off the bench, but he had the best defensive rating of anyone on the team by a pretty significant margin of around about 104. I think with Tacko Fall on the court through the first two games, that their defensive rating is about 10 points worse per 100 possessions with him on the floor versus Gillespie on the floor. But it's not really about Tacko Fall. It's about the absence of Freddie Gillespie and not having that guy to be able to, alternate between your first and second units and whatever, and just tying things together the way he was doing. He had a slow start to his Breakers career. He had a terrible preseason. He got suspended coming out of that preseason, but he was actually finding a really nice groove, and he was their most talented defensive player. And then they got rid of him and immediately concede 32 points in one first quarter, 42 points in the next first quarter, and 232 points across two games. Like, there's no coincidence involved there at all. They just made a stupid move mid-season to disrupt what was a team in good momentum. And they immediately had two terrible defensive outings for a couple of hefty losses.
This week, the Breakers play against Melbourne United. I think that's in Christchurch, and Sydney Kings. Melbourne United are the best team in the NBL. Sydney Kings are one spot below the Breakers in fourth. So the Breakers are still third, but they've had
they did thrash Melbourne last time they played them as well. I should mention as well, like, that was also the very end of a 5-game away streak, like just all away games in a row. So obviously away in Perth, it's always tough. Away in Illawarra is probably one of their shorter away trips, but when it's coming after a bunch of away trips, there was a fever window though before that, so they had a bit of rest. But that is context to those perhaps being tired performances as well. But as you say, they're back in Aotearoa this week, but they're not back at Spark Arena. They're playing in Christchurch.
And so they play the best team and the team below them on the ladder in fourth. All those away games, that's because of the Breakers as well. So like that,
yeah,
a lot of the issues that the Breakers are facing are from their own doing, but it's a big week for Breakers basketball, I believe, with games against Melbourne and Sydney this week. My final question before we go deep into some Aotearoa sporting matters, if we weren't kind of going deep already, and this does involve my melancholy vibration, putting it on to nature, because I do have a certain disdain for England sport, despite being half English myself. Maybe that's where it stems from.
Self-loathing or something. Yes.
Is there anything you actually dislike about the England Test team with Brendan McCullum as coach?
Yes.
What?
I would say there's two things. One is just a minor one, which is that I think they're too inflexible. Like, I think the dedication towards attacking cricket is good and noble, but like, you are allowed to have those times where you just sit back and try to grind through a difficult period. You don't have to slap your way out of it, which I think India seemed to learn that when we beat them 3-0 in India, thinking back to brighter times recently. Like, they seemed to play, it seemed like they were playing a lot like that same kind of very prescribed way of like, we have to play in this style. And it sort of suited it. Well, I'd say it did suit the players that India had in that squad. It just didn't suit the conditions that they had or the team they were up against. So unfortunately for them, that got them swept. And England have had similar situations in recent years where it's felt like you're just being a little bit too fundamental about it. You're allowed to have some flexibility and still retain this identity. It's fine. You're not like betraying yourselves. But that's just a minor one, because ultimately I think that the fact that they know who they are as a cricket team is a very good thing. Whether you want your team to play like that or not, there's no doubt that it's a commendable way to approach any sporting situation, is at least having a sort of having your idea of what you're trying to go out there and achieve. But there is one very specific thing that I can't stand about them, which is just the way they talk. And it's not really Brendan McCullum. It's a little bit more Ben Stokes, and absolutely a lot more just the English media around them, which maybe needs to be separated a bit, except for the fact, because that's not the team who's doing that. That's the reaction to the team. But I think someone like Ben Stokes keeps saying dumb things, which add into this and lead the
What
media
what
down that
is
path.
what
So,
has he said like in New Zealand?
well, there was I think there was a well-publicized thing recently about him having a whine about like I don't pay attention to the World Test Championship and we're not worried about that. And there's all the it's just good for Test cricket kind of things, like win or lose. But it's nice, but also it's dismissive. I think it's kind of like you don't pay attention to the World Test Championship standings because you're not in contention to make the World Test Championship final. Like it's I think most people, especially, well, yeah, no, that's a it's a little bit different in New Zealand because we have more of an attachment to the Test Championship because we won it that time, so we need it to be a big important thing. But I'd say most cricket fans around the world probably agree that the Test Championship has done good things for the sport. Um, I just I find there is an air of I don't know, a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of holier than thou aspect about I don't like I'm talking specifics and examples, but I don't that might not be the best way to go about it because then we can argue semantics about it. I think there's just more like there is a yeah, there is that sort of arrogant holier than thou element to how that comes across maybe whether it's intended or not, which I don't like, you know. Um, but I also try to ignore because I don't want to get swept up in those kind of things where it's like you're not reacting to the right thing. Like watch the cricket. Don't worry about the interviews afterwards, you know. I have to try catch myself in those moments.
Well, I don't dislike anything. Like there's I don't find anything to dislike about this England team. And yes, I've gone through the motions, right? Because I start with a disdain of England sport. So I find things to fit that disdain. But having had the England experience over the past week, just um, and watching them, and I like, if I was an England cricket fan, I'd enjoy watching them. And like a lot of the England media is a different story. Some
Yeah.
of the semantic stuff, like whatever, like athletes say weird shit all the time. They just say shit to fit whatever ideas they're pondering, as we do. Like I don't really care what they say, but it's a essential like it's just a team that knows what they do. They want to play this way. That's what they do. Like all it shows you how stuck in the mud the so many thoughts and ideas about cricket are. It's like the pandemic. You know, the pandemic came and it just totally changed everything for what? Like everything. Everyone had laptops before the pandemic. Pandemic comes, now everyone has Zoom and everyone works from home. And that suddenly the pandemic comes and we change all the rules about sport. Like it just there was a lot of weird stuff happening from the pandemic where that showed you like why are we doing it this way? Like yeah, it's a cool thing to say. Jacob Bethel doesn't have a first-class century. Like, what's he doing? Yeah, we've poked fun about England selecting players haven't done nothing in county championship cricket. But essentially, it's just a team that plays a certain way that wants players to play that way. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with whatever England are doing. And I've kind of processed all those ideas now to come out the other side where I'm just like, this is just who they are and what they do. I don't actually have any dislike about it. I don't hate anything about it. The cricket's fun from a neutral perspective. Like you're always guaranteed to have some fun watching England. But if you take away England's general historical, we're the big Donnies of the world status, if you get past that, then you just see a cricket team that is just trying to do what they want to do. The only pesky thing is that McCullum and Stokes are Kiwis, and like McCullum could be the Blackcaps coach, and that would be kind of interesting. But whatever. Most of this, I reckon, stems from the fact that the Blackcaps suck against England. The Blackcaps are 1-5 against England in their last 6 tests. So at some point, as a deep cricket ponderer, when my cricket team only loses to England, that needs to be corrected because they lose to a lot of teams, but in the England matchup, they lose. They're only losing. They're 1-5. Like, it's not like they're winning many tests here.
Yeah, and you remember what happened in the one test that they did win was, could have very, very easily not been a win. That was the Neil Wagner one, wasn't it? The wicket, with what, 2-run victory, 1-run victory, something like that.
1-run victory. England, all their wins have been by more than 5 wickets, more than 200 runs. So England dominate the Blackcaps. That's just straight up and down, full steak and cheese. That is what it is. England test team under Brendan McCullum is far better than the Blackcaps. That is a fact. So instead of me feeling some type of way about it, now the proof is in the pudding, and I'm like, wow. England are just, whether you want to say they're good at test cricket or not, whether we want to say they're good at spin bowling or not, no team is going to succeed in Pakistan when they're destroying the pitch. Like, that isn't a referendum on England. That's a referendum on away conditions and how you can cater your away conditions to be unbeatable. Because shit, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, any of those teams go to Pakistan and get those conditions, they're probably not winning. So now I'm just like, okay, I've sorted out my personal disdain of England. Okay, now I'm seeing that England is far better than the Blackcaps in this matchup, England versus New Zealand. And then I'm like, whoa, what's my experience of watching the Blackcaps when they play against England? And it's kind of, it's just disgusting. It's a very strong word, but it disgusts me. Because
I felt disgust at times during that first test, so yeah, strong word, but appropriate.
When the Blackcaps come up against England, they suddenly get timid. And they try to do what England do. It's like, I was thinking about the Panthers in the NRL, right? Because we've talked about how the Warriors have kind of adopted a Penrith Panthers style of play, but they, unless it's the second tier team, like, unless Sean Johnson isn't playing, the Warriors beat the Panthers. No, sorry, unless Sean Johnson isn't playing. The Warriors lose to the Panthers because they're trying to do what the Panthers do, but the Panthers are better at it. The way England test team plays test cricket is very different to the way the Panthers play rugby league. But if you're trying to do what England are doing against England, they're going to do it better than you. Not necessarily the smashing boundaries, which to me smells a lot more like bad Blackcaps bowling than England just smashing balls. Like, I mean, Southey's bowling a good outswinger, then he's bowling just one on the hip. What are you going to do with one on the hip? You either turn it around for a single or you smash it for 4, maybe a 6. England are going to smash those balls to the boundary. I don't see the Blackcaps necessarily adopting the England way of batting, but it's like when England did the short ball plan with such clarity, such focus, such preparation, such planning, and then the Blackcaps do, and it's like they're just reacting to what England do. And there's this, I think ultimately, as I get through my counselling session here, the emotions I'm processing are not necessarily anything to do with England. It's the way the Blackcaps play. It's the way the Blackcaps look when they're playing England. Because they turn to shit. And it's, yes, the Blackcaps turned to shit when they toured Sri Lanka. The Blackcaps turned to shit when they lost to Bangladesh in New Zealand, then when they lost to South Africa in New Zealand, then when they lost to England in New Zealand, then when they lost 2-0, 0-2 to Australia in New Zealand. Like, the Blackcaps have kind of turned to shit in those situations as well, but when they play against England, it just looks and feels completely different. Like, just doesn't, like, all the Blackcaps identity stuff just falls out the window. And they just start playing bad cricket. But again, well, not again, now I'm adding on to that there's two clear themes with the Blackcaps test team right now. That they suck against England, and I am factoring into my reaction. Okay, so if Glenn Phillips bats ahead of Tom Blundell, does that make the Blackcaps good against England? I don't think so. How many different captains have been shit against England? Kane Williamson, Tim Southey, Tom Latham. Like, it's not necessarily Tom Latham's issue, because the others were shit against England as well. Yeah, Will Young's the best batter. Maybe he should be in the team. He's not the best batter. Kane Williamson's the best batter, but he's a very good batter who should be in the team. Did he help the Blackcaps get any wins against England recently? Like, the details of this test against England in Christchurch, like, there are a lot of shitty details that people are going to be discussing. Should they change? How are they going to change? What needs to happen? How do they get good at fielding? To me, my interpretation of this matchup is that the Blackcaps just suck against England, and they've been shit against England going back to when they first toured and lost 3-0 when McCullum started. Then they lost the first test at Bay Oval before bouncing back for a 1-run victory. And now they just got smoked at Hagley. Like, all those losses, again, have been by at least 5 wickets or 200 runs. They are big victories. And the only Blackcaps win has been the smallest margin. So we'll get into some of the changes, maybe in the details and the performance aspect. But the biggest issue for the Blackcaps right now is that they suck against England. And then we add on to that there is no home advantage for the Blackcaps in Test cricket. That sounds pretty drastic, a little bit crazy, but it's true. How can there be a home advantage when Bangladesh defeated New Zealand in a test? Blackcaps won the second test, but they drew that series. Now, when South Africa sent their B team to New Zealand, yeah, sure, the Blackcaps won that test series, honkadory. But when South Africa sent their first 11, that series was a draw. Blackcaps won the first test, lost the second test. What happened against Australia? 0-2, lost both tests. When the Blackcaps, their series victories are against Sri Lanka, who they are historically great against in New Zealand, and South Africa's B team, otherwise they draw series because they lose tests in New Zealand, there's no home advantage there. So we've got a situation where there are two clear trends, two clear themes about the Blackcaps in Test cricket. They suck against England, and there's not much, I'd say no home advantage for them right now. None of those are conducive with a 3-0 series sweep that people were pondering to help them get into the World Test Championship before this test, right? None of those are conducive with just winning Test cricket against England. Like, this is a recipe for losing tests, and it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back, but it's just a fascinating situation where, whether it's the day-to-day coverage of a test, or many of the reactions to individual performances, guys in form, out of form, maybe no balls, drop catches, all those things are cool, and I understand why they're being brought up. But to me, the headline of the Blackcaps right now is that they're not good. They're not dominant in New Zealand, and I am debating whether there's actually a home advantage for them. Because now they've lost, let me put it this way, they've lost 3 tests in a row in New Zealand. But we can get into a little debate about any of the details. You know, you're playing, whether it's the Bangladesh series, South Africa series, whatnot, whatever. The Blackcaps have lost 3 tests in a row in New Zealand. How can there be a home advantage if you've lost 3 tests in a row? And then you've got the fact that the Black Caps just suck against England. Those are the major storylines to me. Those are the major headlines about Black Caps Test cricket. And I think, like, we're working in two different. I got to keep thinking as I'm talking here, because that's what we should do, I guess. I was thinking, like, there's two versions of the Black Caps, right? There's the Sri Lankan version and the Indian version. They sucked in Sri Lanka and lost 0-2. They were good in India, 1-3-0. So I think a lot of people assumed that the Indian version of the Black Caps was going to just be the norm, status quo moving forward. But instead, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the series in India was the outlier, and the status quo of the Black Caps is losing 0-2 in Sri Lanka, losing 5 tests with 1 victory in their last 6 tests against England, losing tests every summer in New Zealand. Like, that has happened. 3 or 4 consecutive summers in a row, the Black Caps have lost a test in New Zealand, let alone the fact that they have lost 3 tests in a row in New Zealand. Wowza.
There is an idea that they got that fits into that I was pondering a lot during that test match, which is like, how do we go from Sri Lanka, terrible tour, India, outstanding tour, like one of the best, if not the best test series the Black Caps have ever had, and then back to seeing what they did against England, where they're just dropping catches and getting out in silly ways and getting dominated with, their bowlers getting dominated in a way where it's just like you're at home in conditions that ought to suit and you're getting slapped around the paddock. So, like, how do you go from these different things? But then this fits into, at the same time, this fits into this wider trend. Like, India went from getting thrashed by us in their own home conditions to straight away beating Australia in a test match really handily too. I was just like stunned by how well they played and how well they just blew them away, especially when the first day it looked like they were just going to continue on the way they had been going, when they get bowled out for a low total and then they bowl Australia out for an even lower one, then put up a huge one in response, so I can go on and win that test comfortably. So that was crazy. And then that Sri Lanka team that thrashed us in Sri Lanka just got bowled out for 42 in South Africa. I would say by the South African team that came here and we swept them, except it's not actually a lot of crossover between those two South African squads. But South Africa are very good at the moment, and I will say that World Test Championship context stuff, I actually don't think it now matters what happens with us against England, because I don't think, we needed South Africa to drop test matches against Sri Lanka, and if they're bowling them out for 42 in the first test, and then going on to win that one extremely comfortably, that's just not going to happen. Because I think they also have Pakistan touring South Africa afterwards, and they're probably going to beat them. Like, South Africa just seems to be in a good position right now with their test team, and we're not going to catch them on the test championship ladder.
The South Africa series is different though, because that's in South Africa. And the Sri Lanka, I've been trying to make sense of matters and I can't. So that's why I'm the volatility of Black Caps cricket to me fits into the volatility of Test cricket, and that's why Test cricket is awesome right now. Is the results are happening and they're awesome. But so the Black Caps went to Sri Lanka and got destroyed by the hosts. South Africa destroyed Sri Lanka because they're the hosts. But the Black Caps winning in India and then India winning in Australia, that's the real interesting point that that's the point I find most interesting, where they have outplayed their hosts by a significant margin. The Black Caps did it over 3 tests, India did it over 1 test.
And England just did it to the Black Caps as well, outplayed their hosts pretty thoroughly over 4 days, because it didn't even need a 5th day. They won it that comfortably. So this is the volatility of Test cricket at the moment, and it's probably good to keep the Black Caps' recent results within that context as well, because it is part of this bigger picture. Which the best theory I can come up with, and I do think this fits this England versus New Zealand narrative, is that it's it's a bit like the old saying in boxing. We were talking about boxing earlier, so we'll talk about boxing again, where they talk about styles make fights, and it's about the matchups. And I think as far as the Black Caps versus England goes, that is a bad matchup for the Black Caps. The Black Caps, the identity they have in Test cricket and in all cricket is to be the team that's sort of steady. Like they outlast their opponents, they hang in there, they make fewer mistakes. They're up against a very proactive team in England that's out there looking to dominate them, looking to set a tone, and it makes steady as she goes look brittle. The exact same input is getting a very different output because of the other team's approach. And I think there's teams where England have played against, and that their approach has been exposed in a way just because of those matchups. The Black Caps are not one of them. When they play the Black Caps, they make the Black Caps look timid and weak and skittish in response because of how they play.
I actually, I kind of think it's worse because the Black Caps don't stay steady against England. Their steadiness goes into getting frazzled, which goes into disintegration. Whereas I think if the Black Caps just stayed steady and hyper focused on who they are, what they do, and what they're good at, that would be an interesting counter to England. Instead, they move away from their steadiness. They move away from their identity, and that's the key point against the England matchup. England is making the Black Caps move away from what they're good at. That's the most alarming thing. That's the most disgusting thing about losing 5 out of 6 tests against England and only winning by 1 run in the only win. Is that yes, if the Black Caps, their steadiness might not help them beat England, but I would be able to cop it if they just stuck to their identity and who they are. Instead, they get frazzled. Instead, they get a bit hectic. Instead, the basic skills start to fall away. They drop catches and all the other mishaps that happen. So,
and you know what this sounds exactly like as well as the experience of watching the Black Caps play against Australia through all of the years. Like this is how the Black Caps have always played against Australia, and now suddenly England are doing the same thing. It's not just the losing, it's the way they lose and just seem to they don't just lose the game, they lose confidence in themselves and how they lose. It becomes almost like a ritual humiliation, although maybe not quite that strong, because as you say, I think if they held steady, like this, thinking about this now feels kind of illogical to say because they've lost 5 out of 6 test match against this team and probably should have lost 6 out of 6, except they got a 1-run victory like in the other one. Like there's nothing in that tells you that the Black Caps should be able to run it close against England. And yet I kind of feel like they could have been competitive in most of those games, even when they went to England and got beaten. Like there were a couple of those where they set semi-decent 4th innings totals and England cruised to victory. They just smacked their way through, chased 2, 3, 400, whatever. I can't remember exactly. But like if you in theory, you're in that game at that point. Through 3 innings, you're in that game. And that game that we watched just last week, at Hagley Oval there, it's like if they just took their catches when they had England 77 for 4 after setting about 350 out of 349 or something in the first innings, which is a pretty good score at Hagley Oval based on recent games there. That's a good total. It's just that England went and scored 499, but they got there because the Black Caps dropped like 8 catches along the way. It's hard to make 10 wicket-taken opportunities in an innings of Test cricket. It's a lot harder when you have to make 20 because you don't take the 10 that you create. You don't take those first 10, and you got to keep creating more and more. Like they basically had to bowl that team out twice. Suddenly, if they had taken those, well, they would have probably had a lead of 50, maybe even 100 runs in that first innings, and that's a completely different Test match. Like, yeah, if they do the things they're supposed to do, the things that when the Black Caps are at their best they do, which is a major part of that is taking their opportunities, not dropping catches, that kind of stuff. I kind of feel like that was a close test match, and I felt that through a lot of these games against England. So even though they've lost 5 out of 6 and went very close to losing the sixth, it doesn't feel like England are that much better. Like, it doesn't feel like they're that much better talent-wise. It just feels like maybe they're that much better because they've got this tactical trick which works for them, and somehow this matchup against the Blackcaps is just terrible for the Blackcaps, and they have not yet figured out how to, I don't know, how to repel that, how to repel the just the pressure that England puts upon them, and without them making bad pressure derived decisions along the way. So yeah, it seems illogical, but I kind of feel like these teams aren't that far apart, even though England keep thrashing us.
I beg to differ. Like, everything England does forces the Black Caps into that mode. And, like, whip their shit, you're in the contest after day 3. Well, fantastic. You've had a good day 1. It does nothing well, it does something, but it's not like something to hang your head
Well,
on.
it's only as good as the next session kind of thing. You can undo that work very quickly.
And the Black Caps, they'll undo it by a drop catch. They'll undo it by Rachin Ravindra hitting a pull shot straight down the throat of the guy at square leg just after a break. Like, there are a lot of those instances where there is, like, Devon Conway just looking terrible. Tom Latham coming out guns blazing in the first innings and getting out. For some reason, Kane Williamson got out in the 90s. Like, these things, they happen in the games of cricket. But, like, just before Kane Williamson got out in the 90s, they were saying, oh, he doesn't get out in the 90s. Well, what do you know? He got out in the 90s. And those things happen for the Black Caps when they're a bit iffy. I don't think we can take anything away from being in the contest against England. Because if you're in the contest against England, they're in the contest. And if they're in the contest, they're going to smash boundaries. They're going to take wickets. It's just what they do. And I believe in the force that they generate over a game of cricket. Like, if we're talking about the steady Black Caps, what's a product of the steady Black Caps? Grinding the opposition down. England ground the Black Caps down, though. England's pressure...
And also, England don't get ground down themselves.
Yeah, because they've got the mental state, they've got the focus, they've got the intention and all that stuff to fall back on. Some interesting stuff from the last 3 tests at Hagley. Obviously, we're moving to the Basin Reserve, but I just want to point these things out. England scored 499 in the first innings. That's the only score over 400 runs in the last 3 tests at Hagley Oval. Shoaib Bashir took 4 wickets in the first innings. He's the only spinner to take 4 wickets in an innings at Bay Oval in these last 3 tests. So, like, obviously Jasprit Bumrah is awesome. I don't have the stats right here, but he hasn't been very good against the Black Caps in Test cricket. I'll pull it up just so we get this factual. He averages over 40 against the Black Caps, I believe, and like less than 20 against every other nation, which is absolutely ridiculous. Jasprit Bumrah versus New Zealand averages 45. The highest he averages against another nation, test playing nation, is 22 against England.
What? He's twice as bad against the Black Caps than anyone else.
And those tests, like 2 out of his 5 tests against New Zealand were in New Zealand. So most of them are in India, I believe. So he doesn't have the playing away factor. So these are his averages against other test playing nations. Australia 18.8, Bangladesh 12.8, England 22.1, South Africa 20.7, Sri Lanka 9, West Indies 9.2, New Zealand 45.4. So forgive me if I'm not afraid of Jasprit Bumrah. Right? Like, my personal experience watching the Black Caps play Bumrah, most recently in India, like, cool. I just haven't seen him dominate against New Zealand. And then he goes to Australia and he dominates Australia, and you're reminded that this dude's awesome. But I don't care what anyone says about Shoaib Bashir. My experience of watching him play Test cricket, he's pretty good. He's like a young, up-and-coming version of Nathan Lyon. He's kind of tall. He gets the same kind of delivery action and bounce and all those aspects. It's the opposite of Bumrah, but it's something interesting because I just saw Shoaib Bashir take 4 wickets in the first innings at Hagley Oval when, I mean, Keshav Maharaj took 3 wickets in the second innings for South Africa. Nathan Lyon took 3 wickets in the second innings last summer. That's it. And then Bashir comes and he takes 4 wickets. Now we go to the Basin Reserve, where spinners like a bit of Basin Reserve. Nathan Lyon was awesome at the Basin Reserve last summer. The best bowlers in the Test versus Australia at the Basin Reserve by innings: Matt Henry 5 wickets, Nathan Lyon 4 wickets, Glenn Phillips 5 wickets, Nathan Lyon 6 wickets. So I think we're going to get a bit of Bashir at the Basin Reserve, a bit more of Bashir. And this goes to the other theme, like Blackcap spinners haven't necessarily been great in New Zealand, but touring spinners have been pretty good in New Zealand. Like whenever Nathan Lyon comes to New Zealand, he destroys us. Maharaj was pretty good in that series. Like you've done the historical stats. Like I reckon Murali was pretty dominant in New Zealand. Shane Warne might have been
Murali,
dominant.
Warney, both of them, yeah.
Yeah, so like it's just an interesting dynamic. But now we get to some preview ideas about the Basin Reserve, and it's I had to do a lot of shadow work. Shout out to the audiobook that I listened as I was doing the shadow work. Like reflecting on the extremes of Blackcaps Test cricket, because I think that's something that is crept in. Like they lose, then they win. They lose, then they win. They lose, then they win. That's literally their results. And the highs are high and the lows are pretty low. And it's just like, this is a bit too volatile for me. So I had to kind of process that, and then I come out with the, like, you just settle on some clear trends. This is what's happening. And instead of getting caught up in the volatility, personally, I just settle on the Blackcaps have a dubious home record. The Blackcaps suck against England. We'll leave it there for now. That's how I process the my reaction, which is just like, whoa, this is a whirlwind of volatility. It's also quite complex for the Blackcaps team. Conway looks pretty shit again. So, and Will Young, like I was happy, it was all good that he wasn't in the team for the first game. Under the umbrella that if someone doesn't score runs, he's going to be in the team. Like he's putting the pressure on. Daryl Mitchell scored runs, shout out to him. Devon Conway looked pretty crap again. Like they don't get more timidity, frazzled Blackcaps than Devon Conway opening the batting right now, but that's all right. So do you open the batting with Will Young? That could be interesting. But Will Young, I think he averages 15 at the Basin Reserve. We have to wait and see what happens there. Then we've got, you got this Tom Blundell situation. I don't think they'll drop Tom Blundell in this series. Sure. If you want to put Glenn Phillips a spot ahead of Blundell, happy days. You can do whatever you want with the order. But again, I don't think that changes the Blackcaps dynamic. Changing the batting order does not change the vibe of the Blackcaps against England. Like the Blackcaps won't just suddenly look staunch, hearty, steady, tactically astute, and switched on, focused if Tom Blundell is batting 7. Like I don't know if that's going to change much, but yeah, you can make that change.
You either don't score runs at 6 or you don't score runs at 7. Like either way, you don't score runs, right?
Yeah. I think if Blundell keeps on sucking, which let's see what he averages at the Basin Reserve, a big old 55.1.
Home ground.
We have to wait and see. And shout out to Conway. Conway averages 46 at the Basin Reserve. Will Young's literally the only Blackcaps test batter right now averaging below 29 at the Basin Reserve, and he's averaging 15, but I want him in the team. So this is how complex the Blackcaps first 11 is right now. It gets a whole lot more complex. I don't think Tim Southee's a first 11 player right now. And if the Blackcaps want to win, I think they need Mitchell Santner, given what I just said about spin at the Basin Reserve, and given the skill set that Santner has. Like this is an interesting, I thought. If I'm saying that maybe the Blackcaps just need to believe in their steadiness a bit more, embrace their steadiness, hold steady to their steadiness. I think Santner's a good dude for that, because he's a good white ball bowler, so he knows how to bowl against batters who are trying to attack him. He's a tall spinner, so he gets the Basin Reserve bounce. He is an accurate spinner, so he can maybe build a bit of pressure, play into, like when Ravindra got out, it was all about playing into the ego, right? Like, we're going to bowl short, we're going to put the lads back, you're going to hit the ball to those lads. That's what it's going to happen. If Santner's just bowling accurately, with his variations, with his changes of pace, changes of flight, stuff that makes Santner such a good bowler in T20s and ODIs, and pretty good recently in Test cricket, because his last 2 years of Test bowling are his best years of Test bowling, select them. Embrace it. I think it comes at the expense of old mate Southee, and when Southee announced his retirement, it was packaged as he will bow out at Seddon Park, his home ground. The end of an illustrious career. If the Blackcaps are trying to win tests, I don't think Tim Southee's in the first 11 right now. That's just how it is. So I don't know if we're getting the celebration at Seddon Park, you know what I'm saying? Because maybe the only way I can see it happening is if they lose the test at the Basin Reserve, and then they're like, shit, we're losing, so we might as well just let Southee bow out in the first 11. But I don't know how you can watch that test at Hagley and be like, yeah, we're going with Southee. I don't know how you can do that. We're big fans of Southee, but I just don't think he's a first 11 player right now.
Well, I mean, he did take 2 wickets in the first innings, which is the first time he's taken 2 wickets in a test match innings for, I think, 6 matches that he's played. So, you know, he's coming back to form.
Well, congratulations. You got 2 wickets.
It's they had done that for a while.
He's just like, he's not consistent enough. And that, like, Will O'Rourke called himself a spray can, right? Like we talked about on the bonus podcast last Thursday. He's a spray can. He's going to bowl wild deliveries. He's also going to bowl wicket-taking deliveries. Matt Henry is the accurate pressure-building seamer. Nathan Smith is like a pretty handy third seamer. And then I think you've got 2 good spin options, Glenn Phillips, Santner. Southee, he's not bowling accurately enough to do his 129 kilometers per hour thing against England. Like, he's got the swing if conditions are conducive, he's got the nibble, but he's now in my ratio of bad balls per over, now it feels like he's bowling 3 bad balls an over instead of maybe 0.5 to 1. Will O'Rourke, the spray can, he can bowl maybe 4 bad deliveries an over and 2 wicket-taking deliveries an over. Southee might bowl a wicket-taking delivery, but it's like pressure building, repetition of line and length, which England are going to eat up, because if you're repeating your line and length, they're going to smash you. Just feels like Southee's bowling a few too many bad balls, and I want Santner in the team for the Basin Reserve. Like, who's the dude you drop? To me, it's Southee, and that's where we're at, and that obviously makes for a fascinating dynamic for the Basin Reserve and then Seddon Park.
Yeah, it's a frustrating one, but that question of who's the one you drop is an interesting one, because you could bring in Santner for any number of players. You know, you could the straight swap would be Santner in for Phillips, but I don't think that makes any
No,
sense. But you could,
the
yeah,
the straight
go
swap
to
is
another
Santner
city.
in for Conway, and then we get Santner opening the batting in Test
That's
cricket, which I think is, I don't know how to describe it. I think it would just be one of my greatest cricketing moments because it will be like a culmination of everything I've watched about Plunket Shield, where it's like Santner's back in Northern Districts. He's batting 4 behind Kane Williamson. And it's like, wow. And then you got Santner opening the batting, lefty, so he's replacing Conway. He can actually build out an innings because down the order he's got to be a bit more attacking. You got an opening, but oh, wow. It won't happen, but just open a can of worms there.
well, yeah. I mean, I was trying to open a can of worms, but that was a different one than what I was aiming for. I was going to say you could bring in Santner for Conway, but then have maybe Ravinder open, or maybe Tom Blundell's opened in test matches before. Maybe you say, well, you're getting out cheaply anyway, so let's see if you can buy some runs at the top. Like that's literally an idea that they've gone to before in the middle of a series when they were struggling against Australia or the second test. It's okay. We're going to drop Jet Reval. Tom Blundell, what do you reckon? Can you open in test matches? Scores 100 at it scores 100 in Melbourne at the MCG. So that wasn't a version of Tom Blundell that survived. Like that was a bit of a one-off innings, but it was a great innings, and he does have some back up there. The alternative is you could bring Santner in for Blundell, and Conway has to stay in, but Conway's price of staying in the team is you have to wicket keep. And Tom Blundell, frankly, because it's one thing to say his batting's regressed, because it very clearly has. His wicket keeping sneakily has regressed as well. He's been dropping some catches, and it's not been pretty throughout the last 3 series, really. And because it was that less so in India, just because everyone seemed to play really well in India, but in Sri Lanka he was kind of bad with the gloves, and those are very different conditions than what he's used to. But he dropped catches, multiple catches in the England stuff as well.
You know the T20s against Australia where Devon Conway got injured? I think it was at Eden Park, and it might have been a leg side delivery, maybe a wide one on the offside. And he got injured because the ball smashed his hand. It was just the delivery that went straight through the batter, comes to Devon Conway. He drops the ball because it smashed his finger or his hand or something. That I was reminded of that when Tom Blundell dropped the leg side delivery, and he dropped it, but then he started shaking his hand, and it turns out that was a nick, but they weren't going to review it anyway because no one appealed. So again, that's some of the just like strange Blackcaps antics that happen when they're playing against England and under pressure. But to me, I took that as like, this is how you know when a wicketkeeper's either A, not a certified wicketkeeper, or B, out of form. When they not only drop a catch, but they're visibly hurt after dropping the catch, because that means they got smashed on the finger. The ball didn't go into the middle of their gloves. They didn't watch the ball into their gloves where all the padding and the webbing is. The ball hit their finger instead of them catching the ball. And if the ball hits your finger, you're going to get hurt. And that's how Blundell reacted. That was the result of Conway. That's why I'm a bit iffy on Conway, because there's a few of those instances where it's like, yeah, you can do a job, you just don't feel like a certified wicketkeeper. But on the point of Blundell's wicketkeeping, I reckon they just leave him in the series, and then we start to get Mitch Hayes selected for Test series moving forward. I think that is going to happen unless Blundell pulls something out of his backside.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative, if you don't think Hayes ready quite yet, where he's only had 1 Blackcaps series so far, would be maybe you lean on someone who has some international experience, like a Dane Cleaver, or did Cam Fletcher play any international stuff? I can't remember. He got selected. I think he only got selected in the test team and didn't actually play, though. But there are a couple of guys who are...
He's not playing for Auckland right now. So Quinn Sund is the...
likely injured.
Yeah, so he's probably injured. On the wicketkeepers, though, New Zealand is... Well, to be honest, we've got a lot of great players below the Blackcaps that I will want to talk about in a jiffy, but you got Max Chu for Otago, Mitch Hay for Canterbury, Ben Pomare for Northern Districts had a fantastic outing recently. Then you got Cleaver, and Fletcher's at Auckland, but he's out injured, so you got Quinn Sund, a younger wicketkeeper batter there for Auckland. Between Chu, Hay, and Pomare, those are three really good up-and-coming wicketkeeper batters who are going to play a lot of cricket, I reckon, for New Zealand over the next 5 to 10 years.
And these are, they have options. That's the thing. It's just a matter of like how the Blackcaps standard thing is to stay true to their guys and give them an opportunity to play themselves back in. As we saw how long it took for Henry Nicholls to play his way out, and generally speaking, that's a good thing because you got to have a little bit of trust in your dudes. Yeah, it's what McCullum does as well. So it's saying we selected these guys because we think they're the best ones, and we're not going to be swayed by short-term form, even sometimes mid-term form, because we know the caliber of these players. Unfortunately, I think with someone like because I was reminded watching that test match about your point about Conway getting the casual contract at the same time as Kane Williamson and being like, these two have not given equal service to get equal, whatever service, whatever the opposite of service is from the other side. Benefits, yes, there we go. Like, it's not the same thing. And I think at this stage, we've arguably seen more years of bad Conway in Test cricket, or at least subpar kind of stuff, than we have the first couple of years of spectacular Devon Conway. And it just seems like it just seems too obvious that he's been figured out and he gets out in the same ways. And he's getting out in ways that are atypical of the opening batter as well, which is just not, getting out caught and bowled and his leading edges and stuff like this we don't need to see that at a time when just quietly Tom Latham's not exactly been producing or churning out runs at the same rate that he has in the past either. He's been a little bit better than Conway, but it's not been quite the same thing. And there was someone on the various, on the Crick Info live commentary stuff where they get the comments, and someone had messaged in there saying like, gee, that India series really papered over a lot of cracks for the Blackcaps. And I kept seeing that being like international cricketing, I don't know, writers, observers, whatever, reacting to that like, this is crazy. Who is this idiot trying to say they beat India in India and you're acting like they're suddenly a bad team? And yet all the New Zealanders responding to that were being like, no, actually it's true. And I think it is true. Like, you had a lot of players who were out of form before, who are still out of form now, were part of a victorious series in India. That was cool. But especially, first of all, they were picking a different bowling lineup. Southey didn't play a couple of those games, so their most out of form bowler wasn't involved. So yeah, that's shielded from that. And then the other guys who were struggling mostly are batters. And that was a series in India where runs were not of the same, runs weren't flowing in the same way. The currency of the runs wasn't the same. It was a low scoring series. So the problem of having guys scoring lower scores is not as significant because everyone's scoring lower scores. It's the difference between Conway getting out cheap and someone else getting 50 or 60 is not the same as Conway getting out cheap and Harry Brooks scoring 170, So they're just, I don't know, they've gone back to being, certain problems in the team have been exposed again in a way where they weren't so much in India, and we were able to play around that. That was sweet as. It was a brilliant series, but this is more like what we've seen the trajectory of them for the last 12 months. And I'm not seeing a way out of it for Conway or Blundell at the moment, quite frankly. And that is a little bit of an upsetting thing. But also I'm seeing a way out of it for Southey because he's retiring. He's already he's stepping off the bus. That's all right. We'll see how that goes selection wise, because they didn't play him in the India game, so there is a precedent there. But yeah, frankly, when you have at least three players in bad enough form that you're thinking about, well, maybe they need to be dropped for the next test match. 3 players in your 11 who are in that state, and a couple others who it's like, well, we don't need to drop them, but they do need to score some runs / take some wickets soon. Let alone the fact that Blackcaps also had a debutant in the last test as well. Like, that as well is not stuff that adds up to a very successful, cohesive test cricket team either. Like, you've got I don't really even think those cracks are papered over. The paper's not holding.
Well, what is the status quo of Blackcaps Test cricket? It's mediocrity. The Indian series was the blip on the radar. It was the
Yeah.
outlier.
Well, it
It was
was.
the
Yeah.
anomaly. Like not like just in the like yeah. It's this is the Blackcaps Test cricket team falling into their groove of being mediocre in New Zealand, generally mediocre, and just bad against England. The so how do you get Will Young into the team? Just rapid fire questions here. What are you doing for Will Young?
Straight swap for Conway would be my preference.
What are you doing for Santner if you want him in the team?
I could go either way on that, but I think I would lean towards not picking him and saying Glenn Phillips, you took five for it was at the base, isn't it? The fiver against Australia. So you say you took a five, you had your best test bowling here last time. We'll ride with that. But I do definitely see the appeal of having him in that test match, specifically for the skill set he offers, which I do think your point about him being able to bowl against aggressive batters is a very valuable one.
What's your digest on Southey?
I think Southey plays out the series. I would like him to, and I expect him to, but I think, yeah, the logical thing might be he would be the one who makes way. I do think a retiring player deserves some level of, benefit and benefit of the doubt in that case. But you have to be careful about where you draw that line at the expense of the team. So yeah, it's a little bit of a tricky one, because there is also you could just also say it's a straight swap in a way to bring in Santner for Nathan Smith as your number eight sort of bowling all rounder. As far as the makeup of the team, that's probably the cleanest move you can make. But yeah, we'll see. Because it's not. It's I guess it's not a home ground for Nathan Smith because he's not from Wellington originally, but he's moved to Wellington. He's played his best cricket in Wellington, so it also is the ground where he is. That's kind of the one you want him at if he's going to play any of these games. So these are tricky decisions to be made, and I think the part of the trickiness there is it doesn't address like none of these address the major problem, which is well, Will Young can address one of the major problems, which is Conway's lack of runs. There's nothing in here that solves the fact that Blundell is struggling though, because there's no other wicketkeeper in the squad. And if you keep Conway in there, then you keep Conway's bat in there. You keep Conway's bat in there, you might as well keep Blundell's bat in there, and you've got an out of form batter either way. So there is a way you can drop both of them, but then that leads to either you have to call up someone from outside, which is easily done. There, it's a home series. There's plenty of keepers going around. You can always just hide the drama of it by saying Tom Blundell hurt his thumb. Can't keep. We're going to bring in another keeper as a replacement. You can do that, but I don't. That feels too hectic and proactive for the way that the Blackcaps operate. So, unfortunately, I think we're going to have at least one or not two of these out of form issues, if not all three, in the squad or in the 11 for the second test.
I think the point for the Blackcaps of giving their players a long leash and showing faith in them, like that is expired. Like Tom Blundell's been out of form for a long time. Devon Conway has been out of form for a long time. Like Devon Conway has 2 years averaging over 40 and 2 years averaging below 40. 2 years averaging below 35. Like he's been out of form for a long time. Southey, everyone's been talking about him being out of form since last summer. These dudes have been out of form for at least 12 months and they've been given the faith to this point. So what's another couple of weeks? Southey at the Basin Reserve averages 32.9, which is Sir Richard Hadley averaged 20.2, Chris Martin averaged 29.8, Trent Bolt averaged 27.9, Matt Henry averages 25.5. So it's not exactly Southey's favourite ground. And shout out to Nathan Lyon averaging 13.5 at the Basin Reserve as basically the only spinner. but he did well. So shout out to him. Shout out to the Blackcaps, shout out to England. Let me just drop a couple of quick Plunket Shield notes, but the Plunket Shield and even the HBJ Shield, I think these highlight how strong New Zealand cricket is if you can look past the Blackcaps and perhaps the Australian demolition, which I think is coming for the White Ferns. I was thinking, okay, so the biggest story last week for New Zealand cricket essentially was Bevon Jacobs getting an IPL contract. So let me put it this way. New Zealand has two 22-year-old batters. One of them is Bevon Jacobs, who just got an IPL contract, largely thanks to his T20 strike rate of 189. Bevon Jacobs is also averaging 55.8 in first-class batting after 3 games, so small sample size. Forget the stats. New Zealand has a 22-year-old batter who just got an IPL contract out of nowhere, right? So that's cool. Bevon Jacobs, shout out to you. New Zealand also has a 22-year-old batter who is averaging 70.1 after 19 innings of first-class batting. That's the one and only Rhys Mariu from Canterbury, who just his 2 games as captain for Canterbury, he's got 240, 8 not out, 185. New Zealand cricket has a 22-year-old who just got an IPL contract out of nowhere and a 22-year-old averaging 70 in first-class batting. Whatever holes you want to pick at that argument or that fact, cool, it's happened. I think that's pretty nifty. I like it. Shows that there's a fair bit of talent on the ground in Aotearoa, but also shout out to Brett Hampton at the other end of the scale, 33 years old. He is Plunket Shield so far. He's averaging 58.7 with a strike rate of 100. This is the Brett Hampton who has a one-day strike rate of 108.5, and obviously, and his T20 strike rate's actually not that good, 123. He hit a century for Northern Districts with a strike rate of over 100 recently in the Plunket Shield, and he is also... I was looking for him in the wicket-taking charts, and he's at the top. 13 wickets at an average of 16.9. So Brett Hampton, 33-year-old Brett Hampton, in the Plunket Shield this season. He is 235 runs, average of 58.7, strike rate of 100, and he's got 13 wickets at an average of 16.9. Fantastic from Brett Hampton. One of my last favourites, or my last favourite Plunket Shield player, so Rhys Mariu, Bevon Jacobs, and Brett Hampton. Then we got 25-year-old Matt Fisher, who has 10 wickets at an average of 20, and he has a first-class bowling record of 25, averaging 25.1, one-day average of 24.2, and he's probably one of the fastest bowlers on the domestic circuit. I'd say he's probably the fastest young emerging bowler, and he is bowling pretty well in the Plunket Shield right now. He's got 2 wickets, 3 wickets, 1 wicket, 4 wickets. The 4 wickets recently against Otago, a lot of short pitch bowling, hurrying batters up, and he is one of my favourite seamers. And then we've got Brett Hampton. And we've got the 2 batters, Rhys Mariu and Bevon Jacobs, doing fantastic stuff in the Plunket Shield. Let me check in with the Plunket Shield ladder. Northern Districts and CD. Northern Districts are 2 wins, 1 draw. CD, 2 wins, 1 loss. Then we've got Canterbury and Auckland, 1 of each. Win, lose, draw. Wellington, no wins, 2 losses, 1 draw. Otago, no wins, 1 loss, 2 draws. In the Plunket Shield... Meanwhile, in the Halliburton-Johnston Shield, Otago are 4-0, which, along with lots of good stuff in recent summers, has seen Craig Cumming get a job in England, coaching one of the women's teams in England, so shout out to him. But Otago are 4-0, and where do you begin with all their exceptional performers so far after 2 weekends of Halliburton-Johnston Shield cricket? Otago, obviously they've won all 4 of their games, and they have played Canterbury and Wellington, who are both at the bottom of the table. So obviously losing to Otago isn't going to help their standing, but Otago's kind of put Canterbury and Wellington in their place. Best performers for Otago so far this season. To me, the most outstanding is Bella James, who has a century and a 50 in her 4 innings, 246 runs, average of 82, decent strike rate as well of 88. Bella James she's an aggressive, kind of powerful opening batter who, if the White Ferns really cared about domestic cricket, might get an opportunity in the coming 6 months, but we'll have to wait and see. Don't want to talk up any domestic cricketers' White Ferns hopes at the moment. The Otago also well led by the likes of Felicity Robertson and Polly Ingles. Polly Ingles she had an aggressive knock over the weekend. I think it was a 42 not out with a decent strike rate. You've got Caitlin Blakely, was pretty good in the A series against England off the top of my head last summer. She has a 50 as well. 155 runs, averaging 51, strike rate of 73. So they're all doing pretty well. As far as Otago's wicket takers, Louisa Kopkamp was fantastic in the opening weekend. She's got 6 wickets. Hayley Jensen and Eden Carson both have 6 wickets. Carson's come back from the T20 World Cup with the most overs for Otago, tied with Emma Black, but Carson's got 6 wickets at an average of 15, 2.5 RPO. Emma Black's been steady, not dominant as she has been over the last 5 summers. She's got 4 wickets at an average of 30. Bella James and Caitlin Blakely are the most interesting in terms of White Ferns context because they're pretty experienced, mature batters for Otago who have consistently flashed the ability to bat at a higher level, I reckon. So as far as the White Ferns go, I reckon they're the most interesting, but Anna Browning just keeps catching my attention. She did it last summer when she helped Auckland get an epic Super Smash victory over Canterbury at Hagley Oval. Now she's made the move down to Otago, and she is the leading wicket taker for Otago. She's got 8 wickets at an average of 12.8, 4.1 RPO, and she doesn't score big runs. She's only got 52 runs in 3 innings, but she's got a couple of not outs, 2 not outs, which gives her a big average of 52, and she just chimes in with runs. 19 not out in the Sunday game with 1 wicket. Didn't bat in the Saturday game against Wellington, 4 wickets. The Sunday against Canterbury, 32 runs, 3 wickets. Saturday against Canterbury, 1 not out, didn't bowl. She is, and for context, as we go through the 10-game phase on Cricinfo, her season finished for Auckland with 2 wickets, 1 wicket, no wicket, 1 wicket, no wicket, no wicket, and she had 5 scores below 10 in her last 16 innings with a 19. So she has taken wickets in every innings that she's bowled in so far this season, and she's either scored a 32 or she's finished not out. And I reckon she's a pretty damn good cricketer. So fascinated to see how she develops into the Super Smash for Otago, but also if she can just maintain her constant contributions for the best team in women's domestic cricket right now, the Otago Sparks. Shout out to them. Got to throw this out there with the mad respects to the rest of Aotearoa, but we are from Auckland, so big up Auckland football, because Auckland United won their Women's National League. Auckland City won the Men's National League. After you told me how shit they were all season. Just joking. I know.
Only by Auckland City standards, you know. And another year they might have won 4-0 in the final. You know, the fact they went to extra time is there's your clue. But
yeah, so
that was also a trend of their season, was finding late goals when they needed them.
But then their opponent was Birkenhead United, who's also from Auckland. So either way,
yeah,
it was going to be an Auckland
win-win
weekend of football. So many variations on the Auckland. We got Auckland United in the women's side. We got Auckland City as far as teams with Auckland in their name, because then we get to Auckland FC. And I mean, feel free to offer any National League bits and pieces that you want to as we roll through this discussion. But Auckland FC are just awesome. They are top of the table. They are 5-0, yet to concede a goal. And the only team with the next best defense as far as goals conceded is the Wellington Phoenix on 3 goals conceded. And then you go Melbourne Victory, who are second on 4 goals conceded. So A, Aotearoa dominates the A-League, and B, Auckland FC haven't conceded a goal, and the second best team in defense has conceded 3 goals. So it's not like there's a 1-goal margin there. It's 3 goals the difference between Auckland FC and Wellington Phoenix. What do I have as far as my observations? I want to big up Nando. Not Nandor Tanchos, but Nando Pijnaker, because I loved his performance against Newcastle. And there was a lot going on with that. There always is, as far as Auckland FC and Wellington Phoenix. And we will be previewing this derby game on Thursday on our bonus podcast. But whether it's the Auckland FC ability to win turnovers up the field, their pressing ability, or you've got Verstrata winning the ball in the midfield. We've talked a lot about how they attack. Gillian on the left, Rogerson on the right, Mai in the middle. Had a lot of Brimmer and Gallios on Saturday against Newcastle. There was also Callan Elliott at right back, stepping in for Sakai. Did a fantastic job, I reckon. Nando's is he my favourite player? I reckon he's my favourite player given what I've seen with how he showed a bit. He's got this he's got a shimmy to step into the midfield. He's got a shimmy to shake off the striker, the Chris Wood type of striker, whatever, and then step into the space moving forward. And he's quite aggressive when he wants to do that. He's got the ball at the back, and then he will take up the space in front of him. I reckon that space, though, is created by his left-footed passing ability. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Nottingham Forest has a left-sided centre-back, Mariu?
Yep, that's the one.
I saw him do the same pass a few times during the games that I watched. And it's a left-sided centre-back whipping the ball around the right winger for the other team to get the ball upfield to your left back. So if you're a right-footed centre-back, you can't make that pass unless you're going outside of your foot and you're kind of curling it around the opposition winger, which is an incredibly risky pass to do. Sure, if you can do it, you can do it. But
yeah, because
not
if you lose the ball there, you're losing it in the middle of the pitch where they can hit you straight away versus losing the ball out wide. It's more likely to be touched out for a throw-in or something. But then also the other factor of there is, where does the left back receive the ball? because the right-footed guy playing that pass, it's curling back into him, right? So he has to sort of stop and receive that, whereas the left-footed pass curling up the line, it's going with the sideline, and you can then just like receive that in motion and carry it forward up the line. Like
And
it's just a more effective version of that pass.
but if you're brave enough to do it with the outside of your right foot, you're still getting that curl. It just looks a bit ridiculous, and it's a
Yeah,
very, very
yeah.
risky pass to make. But it's you need a left-footed centre back to do it, and they need to be good at passing the ball. Like you need to be powerful, accurate with the right whip to get a little bit of curl on it, but that enables your left back to get upfield. Because what happens is that right winger, they're just trying to stay level with the left back. They'll like they'll try and stay in field to cut off the passes going into the middle of the field, but as long as they are level with the left back pushing upfield, most of those right wingers will back themselves to stop the pass or put pressure on the ball once it gets there. But Nando, and I saw Mariu do it a few times for Nottingham Forest, they whip those passes in so fast that it just cuts out that right winger. And if Nando does that a few times, then he's opening up the inside channel, which I saw him do as well, because he's a good left-footed passer. So then he's giving the straight ball. And if he's doing those things a few times, then he's creating space in front of him for him to step forward in, draw an attacker, pass it in behind, away we go. And that left-sided mix is quite interesting because it's Freddie de Vries at left back, who isn't necessarily fast, so he's relying on his positioning and his reading of the game to make the most of that left-sided left. Because when you think wing-backs, I'm not sure if he's a wing-back necessarily, but when you think wing-backs, you're thinking Sam Sutton, Callan Elliott, like those type of quick defenders who get up and down the sideline. Respect to De Vries, he's not necessarily as lively as those dudes, but he's always in the right spot. He's always dragging the defender just enough. He's got that nous, that know-how with Nando to make sure he's in the right positions. And then you're getting Brimmer involved. Then you're getting Gillian involved on that left side as well. To me, it all starts with Nando at the back. And like I know, Kiwi defenders, Finn Sermon, Nando Pijnaker, maybe Tyler Bindon. They're going to be physical. They're going to block shots. They're going to win the headers. They're going to make the easy pass nice. Correct me if I'm wrong. Bindon and Sermon aren't left-footed.
No, but Bindon is close enough that he can play. He does play a fair bit of left centre back. He plays left centre back for Reading, which is partly just because they have to work with what they've got, but also like he has the skills to play that position and make a few passes with his left. You know, he's a very skilled player on the ball.
Yeah, he's not necessarily a good example of just a prototypical Kiwi centre back. Finn Sermon.
Yeah, that's more the Finn Sermon, Michael Boxall role is
carry
on the lineage of Winston Reid, Ryan Nelson before them. You know.
Yeah, they do a great job at that style of centre back. I think Bindon spent a lot more time. Well, Nando spent time overseas as well, but long story short, watching Nando pass the ball on top of all his defensive craft and instincts and goal scoring ability, his left-footed passing game is sublime, and I am fascinated to see that come up against the Wellington Phoenix this weekend.
And I'm still waiting to see a bit more of that, which I guess is maybe the last trick that had come out, is the crossfield switch I was talking about last week, where or not even just the crossfield switch, like just the long ball up to the striker kind of thing as well, where maybe that guy's looking to flick it on or run in behind perhaps, but just his ability to access space with his passing game for over big distances as well. We got a little bit of that in the most recent game, but also weather conditions were pretty rough, so it wasn't really the game for that kind of stuff to happen. But against the Wellington Phoenix, who, well, I suspect they won't have the wing back formation. I suspect they won't have the sort of back three with the wide players further up, which would have left some space back there. But potentially with, if it's a two centre back formation, perhaps that also is something, because the Phoenix key thing of how they play is to get those fullbacks up there, whether they're fullbacks or wing backs. So just because they're playing with fullbacks doesn't mean that Sam Sutton or whoever or Tim Payne, actually both of them missed the most recent game, but they've had 2 weeks to recover. So those guys go forward, lose the ball. Nando Pijnaker is the kind of guy who can get that ball very quickly to Logan Rogerson or whoever on the other side, running into that space that's been left behind. So there's a lot to this. There's a lot to his game. He does look like a big bruising kind of centre back, but he's always had a bit of a bit of pizzazz about his close control and his ability to play with the ball at his feet and that kind of stuff. So at times, as a younger centre back, that would make him look a little bit clumsy. I think at this age where he's sort of 24, 25, 26 range, I think he's really like he's coming to his own physically, to where he's like that's not a drama now. He's able to just run around and be big, be bruising, shove guys around, but also still be balanced and be in control with the ball. And I was, like a lot of people, I was a little bit, getting a little bit frisky of him playing in Ireland, being like, yeah, but you sort of need to move up to the next level at some point. At least you need to move up to the next level if you're going to stay as an all-white starter, because Tyler Binton is coming, Ben Sermon is coming, So the move to Auckland FC was a little bit of like, well, that's okay, that's interesting, but you're moving from Europe back to New Zealand where there's fewer direct things. That doesn't necessarily mean there is, like, a couple years here playing very well, and we've seen what Alex Paulson has already done. Signed with a Premier League club straight out of the A League, so that stuff is getting more and more accessible. But it was an interesting move for him. I'm now firmly of the opinion that it was a fantastic move for him, because you're seeing a very confident version of him. And I think he was playing really well in Ireland at the start of the year. So he was in good form already. He's playing better now for Auckland FC as part of a strong defensive unit. So that helps. Like keeping track of this Alex Paulson stat, he's now gone 738 minutes without conceding a goal in senior football for the All Whites and in the A League. So that's pretty incredible. That helps. But yeah, there's the Nando Pijnaker transfer has gone fantastic for him, and for Auckland FC, that was a very good move, and he's been great for them. And that's part of the it's 5 clean sheets in a row now, isn't it? 5 clean sheets in a row, and I'm not sure you can say like, yeah, but it's all Alex Paulson. Like, Alex Paulson's making all these saves. Yeah, Alex Paulson's made some saves. He's probably a lot busier playing for the Wellington Phoenix last year than he has been so far here. So I'm not sure that quite. It's certainly not all on his shoulders. Dan Hall and Nando Pijnaker have been fantastic, but it's not like man of the match stuff every week. Hiroki Sakai didn't play this game. And like you say, Callan Elliott comes in and does really well. Like, Francis de Vries has exceeded all expectations on left back. Like, there's not been a weak link in that defense. And Louis Verstrada, one of the best players in the A League now, I'm pretty confident in saying. He's just so smooth. He's doing all the same things as Alex Rufer. One of the things people love about Alex Rufer is you can kind of see the gears grinding with Rufer. Like, he's a player who has made the most of his abilities. He's very smart. He's very efficient about what he does. But for Strada is like, he does the same stuff without breaking a sweat. Like, you see Alex Rufer breaking a sweat, and that's it again. Like, that's one of the things fans love about him, because you want to see players sweating for your team. But it's also pretty cool to see a dude who's just so in control. He's in the right spot just every time, reading the play like a picture book. He doesn't break a sweat. He's just that smooth, that efficient, that good.
No one's saying the Wellington Phoenix are a great defensive team because of one player. But I think there can be the assumption that, okay, it's Alex Paulson, it's your centre backs, it's your Shape, it's your Verstrada,
I'll say, I think Alex Paulson's influence on the Phoenix is great. They were the best defensive team in the A League last season. Auckland FC has been the best defensive team so far. I think Paulson's influence on the Phoenix being that good defensively last year has been greater than it has been for Auckland FC so far.
I agree, but my point is that their defense starts up top. Their defense is
Yeah,
a
across the
team-wide thing.
Barbarousas.
Their defense is a coach. Their defense is a system that when Callan Elliott steps in for his first game, he's doing the job. Their defensive excellence is their identity. How about that? Auckland FC is just a great defensive organisation, and that is why they are the best team in the A-League, and it's all the little bits and pieces that I think makes this derby game in Auckland a fascinating matchup coming up this weekend that we will discuss in our bonus pod on Patreon. And for anyone with a paid Substack subscription, just quickly with the National League finals, who are the best young emerging players in those finals? Did we get a Stipe Jukic moment? Who stood out for you with Auckland United?
Well, with Auckland United, yeah, we did get a Stipe Jukic moment. It was less than 2 minutes into the game when
Well, you
Pierre
said
Vlok curls
Auckland.
one into the top corner.
Oh, so we had a Stipe Jukic moment for Auckland United.
Yeah, sorry. We had a Stipe
Right.
Jukic parallel moment
Okay.
for Auckland United.
We
We
had a
didn't
Pierre
actually,
Vlok moment.
we didn't get a Stipe Jukic moment in the Auckland City game. He actually had quite a quiet game. He's a couple of moments where there was one moment late in the first half where he was almost through and Harris Seb like rugby tackles him to the ground. Two different, he got booked for it, and two different Auckland City players also got booked in that moment, arguing with it. Yeah,
So you told me that Stipe Jukic was the rugby player.
well, I told you he likes a bit of the well, I told you he doesn't mind doing a bit of the down and dirty work, and he doesn't mind getting niggly with his opponents. Unfortunately, it went the other way for him in this game. It was always going to the way that Birkenhead liked to play, the way that Auckland City liked to play. But first of all, Auckland United game before that, Pia Vlok probably wouldn't have played. She didn't play very much for them during the winter season. I'm not sure entirely why. I think she is someone who's played a lot of boys football, so I think maybe they were keeping her playing some of that stuff rather than playing in the NRFL Premiership, which isn't necessarily like there's a bit of more of a gap from week to week between the best teams and the worst teams in that division. Perhaps they just felt it was better for her development there, but also she missed a lot of time because not only was she with the under-17 World Cup squad, but she was young enough that she was also with the under-16 squad that was qualifying for next year's under-17 World Cup. So she wasn't available for much of the National League because of that, but she did play last week and she got a couple of assists just in a little bit of a rotated team. But Chloe Knott was unavailable for the grand final. So there's one of your very best players not able to go. Well, let's chuck the 16-year-old in, the 16-year-old borderline phenom. I've talked her up for over a year because she was doing stuff like this as a 15-year-old in last year's championship winning team. Did play off the bench in the final that day as well. And yeah, no worries. My youngest player on the pitch, but she's just skipping around tackles. She scored a goal very early. It was a goalkeeping mistake from Waterside Kororu's Annie Foot, unfortunately. And she probably will feel that all three goals she conceded, she could have done better with. She did also make a couple spectacular saves outside of that. So it's not like it was a shocker. It was just that, yeah, you just can't be giving Auckland United a head start in the grand final and being 2-0 down early doors. So yeah, that's effectively set up the victory for United, who completed quadruple, matching what the Auckland City men's team did in 2022. But they also completed an undefeated season, which Auckland City 2022 did not do. They lost a game or two in the National League. That's 41 games this year in 2024. 41 games in which they've won 38 of them. They've drawn 3, lost none, of course. They've won 4 trophies. They've won the local premiership. They've won the Oceania Champions League. They won the Kate Shepherd Cup. They won the National League. They have scored 118 goals and conceded 18. So 18 goals conceded in 41 games is alone quite incredible. Because they won by 2 goals here, that meant they also finished the year with a plus 100 goal difference, which is a sneaky decent milestone and amongst all the other amazing milestones. But Pierre Vlock wasn't the only goal scorer in this game. They also got a double from Charlotte Roach, who won the Golden Boot because she scored a couple goals last week and a couple goals the week before. This is actually 3 games in a row she scored twice. So she might be a little bit annoyed she got subbed off with half an hour to go when she was on a hat trick. And I think she actually had a double earlier in the season as well. She's 4 times she scored twice, but she hasn't got a hat trick in any of those games. But she was the Golden Boot, and then she scored 2 more goals on top of being the Golden Boot winner in the final. Great stuff from her. She's only like 20 as well, so she's only a few years older than Pia Vlock. She's moved up from Canterbury to Auckland United this year, and yeah, really just rounding off her game, adding a lot of hold up stuff, adding some clever layoffs, and just the movement, the run she makes. The first goal she scored was from charging down a clearance from the goalkeeper after an underhit back pass. It's like a great example of a goal you get from just being tenacious, from just keep on running, keep on just, put the foot on the gas and go for it. And yeah, Charlotte Roach, another star of the championship for Auckland United, but of course they're a stacked team. They got good imports. Hannah Mitchell had a strong game in goal. Yuma Harashima did an excellent job shutting down Karori's most dangerous player, Emma Starr. So it was it was set up by the early goals, but it was ultimately and Karori did give them they had a go. They gave them as much as they could, but it was definitely like the best team won kind of situation with Auckland City. From my this is a harder game to write about because I couldn't take notes to it because I was commentating on it with my boy Glenn Lama. So good fun there, but it was a wild game. Like it was very physical, very full of running from both teams. It was a lot of heavy challenges kind of thing, and just hectic football. Birkenhead did score first, but Auckland City, ultimately the difference in the game was Auckland City's bench. And as much as I was sitting there waiting to be able to say some great stuff about Stipe Jukic and the sort of superstar prospect he is, didn't really get that opportunity because it didn't really happen for him. But what happened instead was that kind of that championship story that you get where it's like, on comes Dylan Manicum off the bench, influential. On comes Ryan DeVries off the bench, influential. On comes Angus Kilcoley off the bench, influential, scores the winner in extra time. Kentaro Ozaki also had a very good game off the bench, and Regi Murati gave him good impact up on the right wing as well. So that's your caliber of substitutes that you're bringing on. Like a few of those guys have been involved in countless trophies won for Auckland City through the years. It's like there's not only is there no let up, they're arguably able to turn it up even further. And I think it was quite a sneaky, clever move from Albia Riera as well, too, because Dylan Manicum has started every single game through the National League and then finds himself on the bench for the grand final, which seems like a bit of a seems like a bit of a stinger, but then because of that, he comes on after 60, 70 minutes or something like that, ends up going extra time, so he's still getting a big outlet out there, but he is on the pitch at the most crucial time when the trophy is decided, and he sets up the goal that Kilcoley scores. Kilcoley, same deal. Like he's been coming off same deal in that he's an impact sub, but he's been coming off the bench mostly throughout this National League, and he's still managed to score, I think, including the final, 5 goals and 3 assists, and he's started 1 game. He's played every game, but he started 1. 9 of those are as a sub. So big impact, like big influence as a substitute, and just the depth that Auckland City have. And the depth, but also its experience depth. There's guys who've played in grand finals before and can come on and do what they need to do when it matters most. So yeah, that was good fun, but ultimately you sort of got the expected outcome in the women's final. The men's one, I think, was a little more up for grabs because Auckland City had some wobbles and Birkenhead were in good form, and it did go to extra time, so it was definitely could have gone either way. But in the end, you did see the sort of inevitability of Auckland City just grinding them down over the course of the full game, and ultimately finding that big moment when they needed that big moment. Angus Kilcoley, championship in the bag, another trophy for Auckland City. These two teams will meet again, though, early next year because it's not straight Champions League qualifying. They do get a playoff between the first and second team. So there is a 2-legged playoff, in fact. We've had that the last couple of years as Wellington Olympic and Auckland City. We'll get it next year with Birkenhead and Auckland City. So Birkenhead do at least get some kind of reward out of their very good season.
Right, let's finish with a bit of Kiwi NRL corner, but specifically a bit of Warriors. Let's go with squad information. I'm trying to steer clear of the contract stuff because contracts just confuse people, I reckon. They confuse me. Because Motu Pasikalo appeared on the training trial contract list and he's got a top 30 contract list. So,
right.
And these
now
are
I'm confused too.
Like, this is just a guy. I've got no inside sources. I've got no scoops or anything. I'm just going NRL.com and I'm just looking at the Australian media. And NRL.com has Motu Pasikalo top 30 contract, and Australian media has Motu Pasikalo on a training trial contract. So, well, not so, and then we had all these guys on training trial contracts, and it varies from Moala Graham Telfer, good to see he's still with the Warriors. He's pushing for NRL game time, and then you've got someone, let's go with Jason Salalilo from Christchurch, Papanui Jr., who was probably trying to get into the Jersey Fleet under-21s team. So we got a dude who I expect to play 5 NRL games at least this season in Moala Graham Telfer on a training trial contract. And then we got someone trying to crack the under-21s team on a training trial contract. So there's it's just, you got to not, what am I trying to say here? This isn't like a measurement of the best youngsters in the Warriors system. It's just telling us about any players who have moved to the Warriors and making sure players are still around. But we don't necessarily get clarity on that because we've still got Luke Hansen doesn't have any type of official contract. C.O. Kelly isn't on any of these lists. Patrick Moimoi is in all the photos, not in any contract list. Kalis Fatialofa, I've seen him in the photos, not in any contract list. So as a observer of the Warriors system, there are players who I know are in the Warriors. I know they're pushing for consistent New South Wales Cup, let alone trying to crack into the wider NRL team, who don't have any sort of contract listed through the official channels. So we've got to keep that in mind. If you don't see a player on these lists, don't worry. Just make sure the best way to check is if you go to the Warriors, like Instagram, whatever, check out their training photos, try and have a look to see if they're training. The training trial list for the Warriors did highlight that Dayon Amatuanai has returned to the Warriors. So I believe he was in the 2020 SG Ball team, and then he went to Redcliffe as part of the Redcliffe Warriors era, which was a crazy period of Warriors Rugby League to reflect upon. From there, him and Preston Ricky went to the Panthers. Preston Ricky, he's probably trying to take the opportunity left by his Hokianga brethren, James Fisher-Harris. And Dayon Amatuanai has returned to New Zealand. He's a winger who played, I think he was still under 21s for Panthers last year, but he did play a fair bit of New South Wales Cup with the Panthers, and he is probably going to be straight in New South Wales Cup for the Warriors. He's got NRL potential for sure. And then you've got Kahu Kappa, who we knew was returning to the Warriors, coming back from the Roosters. Jet Cleary is the only Aussie in the train and trial contract list. We knew he was coming to the Warriors though. But just because you've seen Jet Cleary in all the contract lists, you've seen a big announcement about Jet Cleary, I don't think we can assume that he is ahead of Luke Hansen, who we don't have any contract information about. Because Luke Hansen was actually playing New South Wales Cup last year and Jet Cleary was playing under 21's Jersey Fleet. Aside from Jet Cleary, all the other training trial contract players are from New Zealand. Amatuanai is returning from Panthers. Kahu Kappa is returning from the Roosters system. So what does that tell us about the Warriors? It tells us that they're investing heavily in local talent, which we already knew. The other pocket of intrigue that I have is the hooker bracket, Jacob Auloa, Makai Tafua. Jacob Auloa was an SG ball player who dabbled in New South Wales Cup. Makai Tafua was an under-21s player who played a lot in New South Wales Cup. I think they are two very good dummy halves that the Warriors are developing. They're still going to be behind Sam Healey, who is behind Freddie Lussick, who is behind Wade Egan. But I would expect them to be playing a lot of New South Wales Cup this season. And if Sam Healey doesn't kick forward with the Warriors this season, Makai Tafua and Jacob Auloa are going to be there ready to pounce. Otherwise, Sam Healey's presence will be beneficial to Tafua and Auloa in building that competitive depth. So it's just like the contract stuff, that's just how the players are paid. That's how the clubs organize how players are paid. And it's important to note there are good Warriors players who we know are training with the Warriors right now, who don't appear in the development list, they don't appear in the top 30, and they don't appear in the train and trial contract list. Many of whom are from Christchurch, many of whom play for St. Thomas of Canterbury. And this is a little bit funky because now we've had news that the Sydney Roosters have sorted out a deal with Rolleston College in Christchurch. The deal is basically just like, we're going to use your facilities for our South Island training camps. And first and foremost, it's all good. As a Warriors fan, just chill out, because now NRL teams are starting to tap into the talent coming out of the South Island. Warriors have a strong connection with St. Thomas of Canterbury, who are back-to-back National Secondary Schools Rugby League champions. Seems notable. And we also know the Bulldogs have an official partnership with Canterbury Rugby League. The Roosters don't have that type of partnership, unofficial or official, but they are setting up a base in the South Island, which is going to be at Rolleston College, where they can use the facilities. So that informs us, A, about the South Island talent. I mean, we've talked about it every week almost, so you should already know there's a lot of rugby league talent coming out of the South Island by now. But also the Roosters are a kind of interesting Kiwi NRL team, because we've had Jared Waerea-Hargreaves leave, Joey Manu's left, Satili Tupanui's left, Kahu Kappa came back from the Roosters, Moala Graham-Taufa came back from the Roosters. The Roosters have always been a very good Kiwi NRL recruiter from New Zealand. They haven't had a great conversion rate on those players playing NRL for the Roosters. And in fact, they kind of end up playing NRL elsewhere. Now we're hearing all this news about like Brandon Smith. He's on the outer. He's not a Roosters type of player. Some of the notable Roosters like Asu Kepa'o, now with the Panthers, Christian Tuipulotu, now with your Dragons, they were high-profile recruits from New Zealand for the Roosters. That deepens the theme there. Cassius Tia was recruited by the Roosters to Australia. Now he's with the Bulldogs. Javan Stevenson-Hala was recruited by the Roosters to go to from Palmerston North. Now he's with the Eels. But the Roosters have always had strong Kiwi NRL links. But right now, it's only really Nofahu White and Siwa Wong, who they recruited from New Zealand, who are in their NRL squad. And off the top of my head, they don't have any South Island players. And they've also, you go Joseph Suali'i, any other players who have left, I can't think of them off the top of my head at the end of the podcast. But they've also lost but Australian players. They've lost a few Australian players.
All right.
From the Roosters as well. I think the Roosters may be going a bit more all in on development. Like, they don't have any South Island players right now, but now they have set up a base in the South Island. Given the murky waters of their Kiwi NRL conversion rate, considering the players who have departed the Roosters from Aotearoa, specifically Manu and Tupanuia, who they recruited at a young age from New Zealand. They have now left. Tupanui to the Bulldogs, Manu to Japan. I'm fascinated to see how the Roosters build out their Kiwi NRL recruitment program now that they have kind of shuffled out a few players, set up a base in the South Island. What's going to happen moving forward? They do have Salisi Faketi from Manurewa and Benaya Iowelu from Otara. They are in their system right now as their best Kiwi NRL prospects hunting NRL football. And that's the Niche Cast for this week. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.